The mysterious visitor. The city never slept. Tall buildings, flashing lights, and the endless sound of traffic made it feel alive. People rushed through the streets, busy with their own lives. No one had time to notice a lonely figure sitting in the corner of a quiet park. She had been there for years, a woman with silver blue skin, deep violet eyes, and long, flowing dark hair. But the most unusual thing about her was the wheelchair she sat in. Nobody knew her name. Nobody knew where she came from. People called her the Silent One. She never spoke. She never asked for help. She never begged for food. Yet, she was always there, a strange presence. Zira had arrived on Earth 15 years ago. Her spaceship had crashed on the outskirts of the city, and she had been found by authorities. But when they saw that she was not human, they became afraid. The government locked her away at first. They studied her, asked her questions, and tried to understand where she had come from. But when they realized she was not dangerous, they let her go. They left her alone in a world that did not understand her, a world that did not care. She could not walk. Her legs did not work anymore. On her home planet, her kind had powerful abilities: telekinesis, healing, strength. But on Earth, all of that was gone. The atmosphere, the gravity, something about this planet had taken away her true self. She had been trapped in this wheelchair for 15 years. The man who noticed. Most people ignored her. But one night, as she sat in her usual spot under the old oak tree, someone finally stopped. His name was John Carter. He was an engineer, a man who built things, fixed things. And tonight, something about the lonely figure in the wheelchair caught his attention. She looked forgotten. John had seen her before, many times, but like everyone else, he had always walked past. Tonight was different. He hesitated, then slowly walked toward her. "Hey there," he said gently. Zira did not move. She did not respond. John frowned. He bent down to her level. "Do you need help?" Still, no answer. But this time, she lifted her head and looked at him. Her violet eyes met his blue ones. For a moment, John felt something strange. It was like looking into the eyes of someone who had seen too much, lost too much. Zira blinked once. Slowly. Then, for the first time in years, she opened her mouth and whispered, "I am trapped." A mystery unfolds. John felt a chill run down his spine. She had a voice, a soft, melodic voice. Not human, but not alien either. He looked at her wheelchair. It was old, rusty, broken in some places. She had been sitting in it for years. "Trapped," he repeated. "In the chair." Zira hesitated. Then she nodded. John's mind raced. Something was wrong here. "Can you walk at all?" he asked. Zira lowered her gaze. "I do not know." That made no sense. How could someone not know if they could walk? John rubbed the back of his neck. "All right," he said. "I'm an engineer. Maybe I can build you a better chair." Zira's lips parted slightly. "No, I do not need a better chair." John frowned. "Then what do you need?" A pause. Then she whispered, "I need to remember the hidden truth." John did not understand what she meant. How could someone forget how to walk? Something deep inside told him that this was not just about paralysis. Something else was going on. But before he could ask more, a strong wind blew through the park. Leaves rustled. The city lights flickered for just a moment. And then Zira's eyes began to glow. It was faint, barely noticeable, but John saw it. His breath caught. This was not normal. This was not human. Who are you?" he whispered. Zira looked at him for a long time. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost lost in the wind, she said, "I am the last of my kind. A new beginning." John had come to the park expecting just another quiet night. But now he stood in front of a mystery. A woman with violet eyes and silver blue skin. A woman who had been trapped in a wheelchair for 15 years. A woman who was not human, and yet somehow felt more human than anyone he had ever met. Something inside him knew this moment was the beginning of something bigger. And for the first time in 15 years, Zyra felt hope. Because tonight, for the first time, someone finally saw her, a friend among strangers. The rain poured heavily that night. Cold, merciless drops crashed against the pavement, drumming like a heartbeat against the silent city. Neon lights reflected off the wet streets, turning puddles into pools of electric blue and crimson. Zyra sat still beneath the ancient oak tree, her wheelchair half covered in fallen leaves. She didn't flinch as the rain soaked her long, dark hair. She didn't react as thunder rumbled across the sky. She had seen many storms before. This one was no different. But tonight, something was different. Because tonight, someone came back. The engineer returns. John Carter stood a few feet away, holding a large black umbrella. He hesitated before stepping closer. "You're still here," he said. His voice carried an odd mixture of relief and curiosity. Zyra didn't respond. He exhaled, adjusting the grip on his umbrella. "I figured you might be." She turned her head slightly, just enough to glance at him with those deep violet eyes. There was something about the way she looked at him, as if she could see more than just his face. John knelt beside her, close enough that the umbrella now covered them both. "I brought this for you." He placed a small, steaming cup in her lap. Zyra stared at it. A faint wisp of heat rose into the cold air. "It's hot chocolate," John explained. "Warms you up. Tastes good too." She lifted the cup carefully, examining the dark liquid inside. Then, slowly, she took a sip. For the first time in 15 years, something warm touched her lips. Her fingers tightened around the cup. The taste was strange, sweet, and rich, a human taste. It was foreign. And yet, for the first time in a long time, it reminded her of something she had lost. Something she could not name. John watched her reaction closely. "So, do you actually like it, or are you just being polite?" A small breath escaped her lips, not quite a laugh, but almost. "I do not know," she admitted. "Fair enough," he said, smiling slightly. And just like that, the silence between them was different. For the first time in years, Zyra was not alone in the storm. The first question. John sat down on the bench beside her, stretching his legs out. "You said you're trapped," he said. In the chair, Zyra lowered her gaze. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the cup on her lap. "Yes." John frowned. "But you don't know why." A pause. Then she shook her head. He studied her carefully. This didn't make sense. A person either could or couldn't walk. There was no in-between. "Did something happen?" he asked. Zyra hesitated. 15 years is a long time to be trapped, John continued. "There has to be a reason." Her grip on the cup tightened. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost drowned by the rain, she whispered, "I was not always like this." John leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" She exhaled slowly. The cold night air turned her breath into mist. "On my world," she said, "we do not move as humans do. Our bodies are strong, but we do not need to use them. We control movement differently." John's mind raced. "You mean telekinesis?" Zyra nodded slowly. John let out a low whistle. "That's insane." "It is natural," she corrected. "Okay, but if that's true," he said, "then why can't you just use it here?" Zyra's fingers curled slightly. "Because something is missing." John blinked. "Missing? Like what?" Zyra turned her head to look at him again. "My people do not just control movement. We are connected to something greater. An energy, a force beyond us. It is what makes us strong. It is what allows us to move." John frowned. "But you lost that connection here." Zyra nodded. "Earth is different. It does not have what I need. Without it, I am weak. My body is trapped. I cannot move. I cannot feel anything." John was quiet for a long time. He had spent years working with machines, fixing broken circuits, repairing things people thought were beyond saving. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. "So," he said finally, "you're saying you're not paralyzed in a human way?" "No," Zaira said softly. "You just lost the key that makes you move." "Yes." John exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Well, that's a hell of a problem." Zaira tilted her head slightly. "You believe me?" John looked at her, really looked at her. "Yeah," he said, "I do." Zaira blinked. She had expected doubt, skepticism, fear. Instead, she found something else, something strange, something she had not seen in a long, long time. Understanding. The first step toward change. John tapped his fingers against his knee. "All right, so if your body isn't actually broken, that means we just have to figure out how to get that connection back, right?" Zaira nodded, though there was hesitation in her expression. "But it is impossible. The connection was lost the moment I crashed here." John grinned. "You clearly don't know how stubborn humans can be." Zaira tilted her head again. "You believe you can fix me." John shrugged. "I mean, I fix machines for a living. You're not a machine." "But," he smirked, "you can't tell me you haven't at least thought about how to restore that energy, right?" Zaira hesitated. Then, finally, she whispered, "There is one way." John leaned in. "I'm listening." Zaira's eyes darkened. "It is dangerous." John smirked. "Good. I hate being bored." For the first time in 15 years, Zaira felt something stir inside her. Hope. And for the first time in her life, she thought, maybe humans weren't so weak after all. A hidden secret about her species. The night had been long, but the city was waking up again. Streetlights flickered off one by one as the first hints of sunrise painted the horizon in soft hues of pink and gold. The storm had passed, leaving behind wet roads and the crisp, fresh scent of rain. John Carter sat in his workshop, staring at the strange woman across from him. Zaira, an alien, a being with abilities beyond human understanding, or at least she used to have them. Now she was just trapped, and he was the only person who cared enough to help her. "All right," John said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Last night, you said there's a way to get your abilities back. So, let's hear it." Zaira sat motionless in her wheelchair, her violet eyes watching him carefully. The dim light of the workshop made her silver-blue skin look almost ghostly. "There is a way," she said finally, "but it is not simple." John scoffed. "Figures. Nothing ever is." He leaned forward. "Tell me anyway." Zaira's fingers curled slightly on her lap. "My people are not like humans. We do not rely on our physical bodies the way you do. Our strength comes from something greater, a force that binds us together." John frowned. "Like telepathy?" Zaira shook her head. "More than that. We are connected to an energy field. It flows through us, around us, within us. It is what allows us to move, to heal, to think beyond limitations." John raised an eyebrow. "You're saying your species runs on magic?" Zaira's lips twitched slightly. "If that is what you wish to call it, then yes. But it is not magic. It is the very essence of our existence." John let out a low whistle. "All right. So what happened when you got to Earth? Why did you lose it?" Zaira's expression darkened. "When I crashed here," she said, "the connection was severed. I could feel it slipping away, fading like a dying star. I tried to hold on to it, but this planet, it does not have what I need. It is empty." John narrowed his eyes. "Empty? What do you mean?" Zaira hesitated before answering. "There is no link here, no energy field, no connection to the force that gives us strength. It is as if your world is cut off from the rest of the universe." John felt a chill run down his spine. He had never thought about Earth in that way before. "So," he said slowly. If Earth doesn't have what you need, then how do we fix this? Zira took a deep breath. There is one way, she admitted, but it is dangerous. John leaned in, his curiosity growing. Go on. Zira hesitated. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost lost in the hum of the machines around them, she said, I need to create a link, a bridge between me and the energy field I lost. John frowned. And how do we do that? She looked at him, her violet eyes glowing faintly. You, she said. John blinked. Me? You are human, Zira continued. But you are also different. I can feel it. John laughed dryly. Well, I've been called a lot of things before, but different isn't exactly new. Zira ignored his sarcasm. There is something inside you, inside all humans, a potential that has never been unlocked. If I can tap into it, I might be able to use your energy as a bridge, a temporary connection to my lost power. John ran a hand through his hair. Let me get this straight. You want to use me as some kind of power socket? Zira tilted her head. That is an odd way of saying it, but yes. John exhaled sharply. And the dangerous part? Zira's gaze darkened. If it fails, it could destroy me. Or you. John sat back in his chair, processing everything. This was insane. Completely, utterly insane. But then again, so was finding an alien woman trapped in a wheelchair. And if there was even a small chance he could help her walk, help her regain what she had lost, could he really say no? John smirked. Well, I always did like high-risk projects. Zira's eyes widened slightly. You are agreeing. John shrugged. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Zira stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 15 years, she smiled. A plan that could change everything. John leaned forward, rubbing his hands together. All right, so what do we need to make this work? Zira hesitated before answering. There is an object, she said slowly. A fragment of my ship. If it still exists, it may hold a small trace of the energy I lost. John frowned. And where exactly is this fragment? Zira's expression darkened. It was taken, she whispered. John's stomach dropped. Taken? By who? Zira met his gaze. Your government. Silence filled the room. John sat back, cursing under his breath. Of course the government would have taken something like that. Let me guess, he said. They're keeping it locked away somewhere top secret. Zira nodded. If I can touch it, even for a moment, I may be able to reconnect. But it will not be easy to retrieve. John rubbed his temples. So let me get this straight. You want us to break into a government facility, steal a piece of your ship, and hope that it somehow fixes everything. Zira nodded. Yes. John chuckled dryly. Yeah, okay. Sure. Why not? Zira frowned slightly. You are joking. John shook his head, a smirk forming on his lips. Nope. I'm just realizing that my life got a whole lot more interesting. Zira watched him carefully. You do not have to do this. John exhaled. Yeah, I know. But let's be real. I was never going to walk away, was I? Zira blinked. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, she said, No, you were not. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, a feeling she thought she had lost forever. Hope. And now, for the first time in 15 years, Zira had a reason to believe that she might one day stand again. The race against time. The plan was madness. John knew it. Zira knew it. But they didn't have a choice. The stolen fragment of Zira's ship was locked away in a government facility. Without it, she would never regain her lost connection. The energy that once made her more than human. And without that power, she would remain trapped in the wheelchair forever. For 15 years, she had accepted this fate. But tonight, for the first time, she dared to hope. Tonight, They would steal back her future. The break-in. The city was alive with flashing lights and sirens, but on the outskirts, in the shadow of an abandoned industrial zone, stood a fortress of concrete and steel. The government called it a storage facility. John knew better. This place was a graveyard where secrets were buried and forgotten. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and glanced at Zira. She sat beside him, her face unreadable, her hands resting lightly on the wheels of her chair. "You sure about this?" he asked. Zira didn't hesitate. "I must do this." John exhaled. "All right then. Let's break the law." He pulled out a small tablet and tapped the screen. The schematics of the facility flickered to life. "Security's tight," he muttered. "Guards on every floor, cameras in all main hallways. But there's a ventilation system here." He pointed to a small service tunnel, big enough for me to crawl through. "That'll take me straight to the archive room." Zira studied the map and the fragment. "Kept in a restricted vault on the lower level," John said. "We'll need to get through 3 layers of security to reach it." Zira's expression remained calm. "Then let us begin." John stared at her. "You're really not nervous?" Zira blinked. "Should I be?" John chuckled. "You really are from another world." She tilted her head slightly. "Yes." John shook his head with a smirk. "All right, alien. Let's go steal your spaceship." Inside the facility. The air inside the facility was stale, filled with the hum of machinery and the distant buzz of fluorescent lights. John moved fast, ducking behind crates and sliding past security checkpoints. His heart pounded in his chest as he whispered into his earpiece, "Zira, I'm in." Outside, hidden in the shadows near the entrance, Zira responded, "Proceed carefully." John smirked. "Oh, don't worry. I'm a professional." 30 seconds later, he tripped a laser sensor. A red light flashed on the wall. An alarm beeped softly. John froze. "John." Zira's voice came through the earpiece. "Why did you stop?" He swallowed. "A slight problem." The beeping grew louder. Zira's voice remained calm. "You have 3 seconds before the alarm triggers fully." John's mind raced. He glanced at the small control panel on the wall beside him. Wires, circuits, if he could just. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a hacking device, and slammed it against the panel. The beeping stopped. Silence. John let out a slow breath. "I am so good at this." Zira's voice was dry. "You almost got caught." "Almost doesn't count," he muttered, moving forward. The vault. The vault was heavily guarded. 2 armed soldiers stood at the door, their rifles gleaming under the white LED lights. John hid behind a crate, whispering, "All right, Zira. You got any alien mind tricks to get past these guys?" There was a pause. Then, "No." John sighed. "Figures." He glanced at his surroundings. There had to be another way. Then he saw it. A fire alarm switch on the wall. John grinned. Time for some good old-fashioned human trickery. He pulled out a small, modified EMP device and tossed it toward the fire alarm. Boom. The alarm blared. Red warning lights flashed. The 2 guards exchanged glances before one of them spoke into his radio. "This is Bravo Team. We have a system malfunction. Requesting override." The second guard frowned. "Could be a security breach. We should check the upper floors." John held his breath. Finally, after a tense moment, the guards moved away from the vault entrance. John grinned. "And that's why humans will always be the best con artists." Zira's voice came through the earpiece. "You are unsettlingly good at deception." "Thanks," he whispered, moving toward the vault. "Now let's get your magic rock." The fragment. The vault door was massive, covered in reinforced steel. But John was prepared. He pulled out a plasma cutter and got to work. Sparks flew as he cut through the lock. Inside the vault, a cold blue glow pulsed from within a glass containment box. The fragment. Zyra's connection to her lost power. John reached for it, and then the door behind him slammed shut. A voice echoed through the speakers. Unauthorized access detected. Intruder located. John's stomach twisted. They had been caught. The countdown begins. Outside, Zyra's fingers tightened on her wheelchair. "John," she said urgently, "what is happening?" John exhaled sharply. "Bad news. We're out of time. Good news. I got your piece of spaceship." A pause. Then Zyra spoke, her voice unusually calm. "I am coming inside." John blinked. "Wait. What? That's not part of the..." The comms cut out. Zyra rolled forward. For 15 years, she had been trapped. For 15 years, she had been helpless. No more. She was not going to lose this chance. Not now. Not when she was this close to standing again. Not when John was in danger because of her. Her violet eyes flashed with determination, and for the first time in years, she felt something stir deep inside her. Something awakening. The experiment and the betrayal. The silence before chaos is the loudest sound of all. Inside the government vault, John Carter stood frozen, gripping the glowing fragment of Zyra's ship. The alarms were screaming. Red warning lights flashed across the metal walls. The air smelled like burnt circuits and sweat. And then the voice returned. "Intruder detected. Surrender immediately." John exhaled sharply. He knew what was coming. Armed guards. Lockdown. No way out. He clenched his jaw. Well, this was a terrible plan. But before he could move, something changed. A strange, low hum filled the air. The vault doors shuddered. The ground beneath him vibrated. And then, boom, the vault doors blasted open. Smoke, sparks. A shockwave of energy rushed into the room. And standing in the doorway, wheelchair completely shattered behind her, was Zyra. And she was standing. Awakening. John's breath caught. 15 years. For 15 years, she had been trapped, bound by gravity, unable to move. Now she stood tall. Her silver-blue skin shimmered under the red alarm lights. Her violet eyes glowed, brighter than before. Something inside her had woken up. Zyra lifted a hand. The guards outside the vault froze mid-step, their weapons yanked out of their hands by an invisible force. John gawked. "Well, that's new." Zyra tilted her head slightly, flexing her fingers as if testing a long-forgotten ability. The air around her shimmered. Then she looked at John. "We must leave," she said simply. John snapped out of his trance. "Yeah, right. Good call." He shoved the fragment into his backpack and ran toward Zyra. She raised her hand again, and the entire vault collapsed behind them, as if an unseen fist had crushed the walls. John blinked. "Okay. That was necessary," Zyra interrupted. John chuckled. "Right. Necessary. Let's get the hell out of here. Escape or trap." The hallways were already flooding with security forces. Zyra's newly awakened abilities made getting past them almost too easy. Guards raised their weapons, only to have them ripped from their hands. Doors meant to trap them ripped off their hinges. Everywhere they ran, the world bent to Zyra's will. John grinned. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Zyra didn't smile, but there was a sharp glint in her eyes. Perhaps. They reached the exit. The cold night air hit them like a slap. Freedom was seconds away. And then, a voice echoed through the speakers. "Stand down, Zyra. We know what you are." Zyra stiffened. John turned. Who the hell? And then he saw them. A group of men in black suits, standing in a perfect line near the facility gates. They weren't holding weapons. They didn't need to, because they weren't afraid. They had been waiting. John's stomach twisted. This was a setup. Zyra had barely spoken in 15 years, yet these men knew her name. Which meant they had known all along. The betrayal. A figure stepped forward. A tall man, sharp features, cold eyes that didn't blink enough. He looked like someone who had never lost a battle in his life. "Zira," he said smoothly, as if they were old friends. "I was hoping we could have a civil conversation before you destroyed half of our facility." Zira's hands curled into fists. "I do not know you." The man smirked. "No, but I know you. And I know exactly what you are capable of." John did not like this guy. "All right, Mr. Government Agent," John snapped. "Let's skip the creepy monologue and get to the part where we walk away." The man chuckled. "Oh, you misunderstand, Mr. Carter." His eyes flickered toward Zira. "You're free to go." John froze. Zira's entire body went rigid. "You," she whispered, violet eyes burning, "wish to keep me." The man smiled. "We don't wish to keep you, Zira. We already own you." The truth they never told her. The words hit Zira like a physical blow. For years, she had thought the government had forgotten her, that they had abandoned their curiosity after finding nothing useful in her. But no, they had been watching her this whole time, waiting for the moment she would awaken. "You crashed here," the man continued, "but we ensured you never left. Did you really think we just let an alien wander free without surveillance?" John clenched his fists. "You did something to her, didn't you?" The man's smile didn't fade. "Let's just say, we ensured that Zira remained exactly where she was needed." The truth clicked in John's mind. They had kept her weak. Something in this city, something in her environment, was deliberately designed to keep her cut off from her powers. The government had been controlling her condition the entire time. Zira's breath trembled. "You trapped me," she whispered. The man gave a slow nod. "And yet, here we are. Looks like our experiment is finally complete." John's heart pounded. "You need to run," he whispered to Zira. But Zira didn't move. She didn't blink. For 15 years, she had been helpless. For 15 years, she had been a prisoner without even knowing it. And now, the ones who had caged her stood before her. "You will not take me," she whispered. The air around them crackled. The ground shook. The guards stepped back. The agent's smirk faded. John took a slow step away from Zira. "Bah, Zira, you good?" Her violet eyes blazed like twin stars. "Aye," she said, voice filled with something ancient and powerful. "Am done running." The sky split open with light, and the world around them exploded. The ultimate sacrifice. The world wasn't ready for this. The night sky split open, electric purple streaks flashing through the clouds. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Streetlights flickered wildly, struggling against the sudden wave of energy that pulsed from the woman standing at the center of it all. For the first time in 15 years, Zira wasn't broken. She wasn't trapped. She was whole again. And the people who had stolen her freedom, they were about to understand why her species was feared across the stars. The moment everything changed. John Carter had seen a lot of crazy things in his life. He had built machines that defied physics. He had broken into government facilities. He had spent years fixing things that were beyond repair. But nothing had prepared him for this. He stood just a few feet behind Zira, watching in stunned silence as the air around her shimmered, bending reality itself. The government agents who had once spoken with calm arrogance now stood frozen, their weapons raised, but useless. The leader, the man with cold eyes and a sharper mind, took a slow step forward. His voice was steady, but the way his fingers curled at his sides betrayed his fear. "Zira," he said carefully, "we don't have to do this." Her violet gaze snapped to him. "You did this to me." The agent exhaled. "You were never our enemy. Then why did you keep me weak?" Her voice cracked like thunder, vibrating through the air. John swallowed. Zira had been quiet, almost detached, ever since he met her. She had been calm in the face of everything. But now she was angry. And for the first time, John realized something chilling. She wasn't just powerful. She was unstoppable. A dangerous choice. The government forces knew it too. "Stand down," the agent ordered. The guards hesitated. No one moved. Because what could they possibly do? What weapon could stop someone who could control the very air around them? Then, the agent did something unexpected. He smiled. "Fine," he said. "If you won't surrender, then neither will we." John felt it before he saw it. A shift in the air. A second pulse of energy. But this one wasn't coming from Zira. It was coming from beneath them. John's eyes widened. "Zira, run." The explosion hit like a shockwave, the force so strong it sent John flying backward. He crashed into the pavement, his vision blurred by smoke and debris. He coughed, struggling to push himself up. And then he saw her. Zira was still standing. But something was wrong. She clutched her side, fingers trembling. Her silver-blue skin was cracked, glowing faintly at the edges, as if something had damaged the very core of her being. "Zira!" John scrambled to his feet, rushing toward her. She turned her head slowly, her violet eyes flickering. "I cannot," she whispered. Then she collapsed. The cost of power. John caught her just in time, lowering her carefully onto the ground. Hey, stay with me." He shook her slightly. Zira's breathing was shallow. Her body trembled, flickering between solid and translucent, as if she was phasing in and out of existence. John's hands tightened around her. "Zira, what the hell is happening?" Her lips barely moved. "I am unstable." John felt his chest tighten. "What do you mean, unstable?" Zira exhaled weakly. "I was never meant to awaken this way. My connection, it was forced. Incomplete." John swallowed hard. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was something worse. If Zira's powers had been locked away for 15 years, if they had been artificially suppressed, then forcing them back this violently might have broken her completely. John clenched his jaw. No, he wasn't going to let this happen. He turned toward the agent, rage burning in his chest. "Fix this." The agent sighed. "It's already too late, Mr. Carter." John's hands curled into fists. "Like hell it is." He turned back to Zira. Her breathing was slowing. No. John had spent his whole life fixing broken things, and he wasn't about to lose the one person who had ever made him believe in something bigger than himself. "Zira, listen to me," he said, voice shaking. "There has to be another way. A way to stabilize you. Tell me what to do." Zira's eyes fluttered. She was fading. Then her fingers twitched weakly. She reached toward him and touched his chest. John sucked in a sharp breath as something cold and electric rushed through him. His heartbeat stuttered, his vision blurred, and for the briefest moment, he saw everything. The stars, the galaxies, the endless sea of energy that connected every living thing in the universe. Zira's connection wasn't lost. It was broken, and it needed something to anchor it back. Something, or someone. John's breath hitched. "You need a bridge," he whispered. "A living one." Zira's fingers trembled. "It will take everything." John's jaw tightened. "Then take it." Her violet eyes widened. "John, take it, Zira." She hesitated, and then she did. The moment she pulled from him, John felt his body weaken. His limbs turned to lead, his heartbeat slowed, his vision darkened. Zira gasped as her body stabilized, the cracks in her skin closing, the violent flickering of her form smoothing into solid reality once more. She was whole. And John was falling. One must fall so the other can rise. Zira caught him before he hit the ground. "John." Her voice was clear now, steady, stronger than it had ever been before. But John's body was failing. She had taken too much. He coughed, smirking weakly. "Well, that was fun." Tears burned in Zira's eyes. "You should not have done that." John exhaled shakily. You said it yourself. I was never going to walk away. Zira held him tightly, pressing her forehead to his. You foolish human, she whispered. And then, for the first time in 15 years, Zira did something she had never done before. She gave back. A single glowing pulse of energy surged from her into him. John's chest jerked. His breath returned. His vision cleared. And Zira smiled. You are not dying today. John blinked. Then, with a slow, tired grin, he muttered, Well, that's good to know. Zira turned her gaze toward the agent. You stole my power, she said. The air hummed. Now watch what happens when I take it back. The final stand. Humanity's redemption. The world stood still. For the first time in 15 years, Zira wasn't trapped. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a prisoner. She was free. And she was angry. The government agent, still standing at the facility gates, felt it too. The air had changed. It hummed with an invisible force, one that made the hair on his arms rise and his breath catch. Zira took a slow step forward, and the ground trembled beneath her. John, still kneeling on the pavement behind her, felt his heart pounding in his chest. She wasn't the same anymore. She had become something else, something greater, something the world wasn't ready for. The agent adjusted his tie, clearing his throat. You've made your point, Zira. His voice was calm, but his eyes, they weren't. Zira stopped a few feet away from him, violet eyes glowing with a light that wasn't human. You do not understand, she said softly. The agent forced a smirk. Oh, and what exactly don't I understand? Zira lifted her hand. The entire sky split open. A power unleashed. Lightning, but not lightning, cracked across the sky, streaks of purple and blue weaving through the clouds like living energy. The air vibrated with a low, unearthly hum, and for the first time, the agent took a step back. Zira's voice was steady. You took everything from me. The wind howled around them. Streetlights shattered, their glass raining down in tiny, weightless shards. The facility behind them groaned as its foundations shifted. John pushed himself to his feet, eyes darting between Zira and the government forces. They were terrified. He had never seen them afraid before. The agent tried to regain control. Zira, listen. No. Zira's voice cut through him like a blade. You listen. The guards raised their weapons, but it was pointless. Zira flicked her fingers. Their guns ripped apart midair, breaking down into nothing but dust. The agent swallowed hard. You don't have to do this. Zira took another step. The pavement cracked beneath her feet. Do you know what it is like to be powerless? She asked. To sit and watch while the world moves without you. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried with it the weight of 15 years of silence. John held his breath. Zira lifted her hand higher. And then, she stopped. The energy around her stilled. The sky quieted. The wind faded. Zira exhaled. And then, softly, she whispered, No, I will not become like you. The agent blinked. What? Zira lowered her hand. You took my freedom. Her violet eyes dimmed slightly, returning to something almost human. But you will not take my soul. The agent opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Zira turned toward John. It is time to go. John hesitated. What do you mean? We can't just. Zira reached for him. Her fingertips barely brushed against his arm. And then, in an instant, the entire world vanished. A new beginning. When John opened his eyes, he wasn't on Earth anymore. He was standing on a platform of light, floating in an endless expanse of stars and colors he didn't have words for. His breath hitched. What the hell? Zira stood beside him, her expression soft for the first time. This is my true home. John turned in a slow circle, staring at the universe around them. But how? He whispered. You gave me what I needed, Zira said. And now, I give you the same." John met her gaze. "What does that mean?" Zira smiled. "It means you are not alone anymore." And as the light around them expanded, as the stars shifted and the endless cosmos stretched before them, John realized something. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Epilogue: Humanity's redemption. Back on Earth, the agent stood frozen, staring at the empty space where Zira and John had vanished. The wind had stopped. The energy had disappeared. But the world would never forget what had happened here. Because for the first time, humanity had been given a choice to rise above their fear, a choice to become something greater. And whether they liked it or not, they had just made first contact, with a future they weren't prepared for, with a destiny they had yet to understand, and with a woman who had finally taken her first steps into the stars. The end.